Okay, so agree or disagree. The majority of people spend more time planning a 2 week vacation, more effort, more focus, more energy goes into planning a 2 week vacation for most people than what goes into planning their lives, like their whole lives. That's the keystone anecdote that Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy open their book Living Forward with. This is a book all about life planning. I took the flaps off because they bother me. The concept of life planning is not revolutionary, it's not anything new. It's simply the act of sitting down and being intentional with your life. Kind of like a budget is you sitting down and being intentional with your money. The drift is that sort of going through the motions, lackadaisical state that we find ourselves in when we're in a very reactionary mode in our lives. It's kind of like that cliche that you hear sometimes of the businessman that wakes up and he's 60 and he realizes he's in terrible health, he's got a bad marriage, he's unsatisfied with his career, and he never fulfilled any of his goals. That's a result of the drift. That's a result of not life planning, essentially, and that's exactly what this book is aimed to prevent. So, one thing to get out of the way, I am growing increasingly weary of business books, especially self help books, because I'm realizing as I read more of them that a lot of them could really be summed up in a blog post. I mean, that's kind of the hard truth. I feel like they sort of just fill the other chapters up with some repetitive stuff. So, this is a self help book. I picked it up because I'm a huge fan of Michael Hyatt's blog, and I've been really helped by a lot of his blog posts, especially on marketing and leadership and stuff like that. So I picked it up really to support him, I guess, and because I'm a huge fan of his work. That being said, it is a self help book, and so I do feel like a lot of this content can be a little bit repetitive. It's a short read. I finished reading it in a weekend, but that's something to be wary of. The basic premise is that we all have these sort of invisible priorities in our life. Whether we choose to believe that we have these priorities or not, they exist. There are certain forces in our life, whether they're people or things, that govern what we do. And the whole premise of this book is that we just need to take some time. They recommend taking a whole work day and essentially getting alone, getting somewhere where you can focus, and writing down all your priorities. And they include a template in the book, so you kind of have some rails to run on, but basically crystallizing those priorities so that you're clear about what's driving you and where you want to go with your life. They call these priorities accounts, which I think is a really good metaphor for it, because it's kind of like a bank account. Every time you neglect your health because of work, you may be depositing money into your work account, but you're withdrawing from your health account, which will inevitably catch up with you. What I could find after reading this book is that there's really a healthy rhythm of life that every human being should abide by. Because if these priorities get out of whack, it's only a matter of time before there's a breakdown or a meltdown or a spillover and everything is ruined. For example, if someone prioritizes their careers or their finances over their health, they may hustle, hustle, hustle in their 20s and then in 30s have a heart attack and die, or succumb to obesity or heart disease, or that's kind of an extreme example, but you get what I mean. Now, as you write out each of these accounts, the authors walk you through specific goals, visions, action steps, really tangible commitments to help you get from where you are now, which they call the current reality, to where you need to be. It's helpful when you have these priorities, because then things come up where you say, okay, if a friend wants to hang out, but I have a date night with my wife, according to my life plan, my wife is a higher priority than my friendships in this instance, so she is always going to trump hanging out with a friend. What surprised me initially was how far down the list work was, and that's not to say that work isn't extremely important, because it's very important and it's an extremely important part of our lives, but it's really eye-opening to see that if we're honest with ourselves, there are a lot of things in our lives that are way more important than work. Our marriages, if we know what's good for us, are way more important than work. Everything starts with self-care in this book. The analogy they use there is, when you're on an airplane and they say before you, in case of loss of cabin pressure, the masks will fall from the ceiling, put yours on first before you help anyone else. And the reason is obviously because if you're blacked out, you can't help anyone. If you're not able to take care of your mind or your spirit or your body, there's no way that you're going to be able to take care of anyone else. One of the really powerful things that this book espouses is writing your own eulogy, which sounds morbid, but it's actually a really good exercise. It's the act of imagining you are at your own funeral as if you died today, and your spouse was there, your mother was there, your father was there, your coworkers there, your people from your church were there, if that applies to you, and it's really imagining, what do I want them to say about me? If there's one thing you take from this video or this book, I would encourage you to just sit down, and again, it's kind of morbid, but I think it's a really valuable exercise to just write out what you want people to say about you at your funeral. You probably want people to say things like, you were selfless, you were full of integrity, you were a hard worker, you were kind, you were hospitable, you were generous. And then you can write these things out and look at them and say, okay, is this a reflection of who I want to be? And it kind of gives you that vision for where you want to grow and where you want to be in the future. If you're going to construct a life plan, I highly recommend keeping it very visual and reviewing it often. For the first 90 days after you make this plan, I recommend reading it every single morning. I actually put mine in a 3-ring binder and I keep it at my desk. I wrote it out and I formatted it so it would be really kind of like a professional document because I wanted to take it very seriously. I've included pictures in certain spots to motivate me to exercise, which I will not share here because I'm 7 pounds overweight, but I want to be safe for the little ears, safe for the little eyes. So the upshot of this whole book and the bottom line is really just to be intentional with every ounce of your life. Even if that's making sure you set aside time to work on your hobbies, things that replenish you, making sure to set aside time for your wife or husband, your significant other for date nights, making sure to set aside time for your kids or for your friendships. So aside from all the flowery language and kind of the self-help stuff you got to get through, I do feel like the world would be a happier, more productive, and more intentional place. Definitely a less frantic and anxious place if people were to construct a life plan and follow it. And I already can tell you that it's been a great help to me. So for that reason, I do recommend that you pick up this book, Living Forward, by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. I'll have a link to the book on my website or probably in the description of this video. If you want to read the written review of this book, and you'll also have a link there to download the book, you can find that at mattkenyon.net/lifeplanning, all one word.